Part 64. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao-do-sde Mao. Chapter 633. After Makoto Takahashi completed the comic manuscripts that Uncle Tintin had missed, although he had complaints in his heart such as why don't you get a raise because of the increased workload, as a qualified cartoonist's assistant, Uncle Tintin was still very serious. I started observing the manga manuscript I just acquired. Of course, before inspecting the manga manuscript, Uncle Tintin gave Makoto Takahashi a thoughtful look. After all, the uncle on the assistant's side did not think that he would just make such a low-level mistake as omitting the comic manuscript, so, it is absolutely certain that the comic manuscripts that a certain second-grade cartoonist just put in were definitely added on a temporary basis, rather than something accidentally omitted. Forcibly arranging the plot in the middle, is it deliberately done to alleviate readers' inability to accept Sakura's part of the plot? Looking at Makoto Takahashi's mark on the comic manuscript, Uncle Tintin scratched his head with a look of contempt. Without concealing it, he turned away from Makoto Takahashi and murmured in a low voice, "That guy Makoto, does he think that through this inferior perspective shifting method, readers can forget the pain and torture that Sakura suffered? That's a real idea. It's so sweet." I quickly flipped through the manga manuscript and found that most of the plots that Makoto Takahashi arranged to join in the middle were from the perspective of a character named Madokaria, or in other words, the plot revolved around Madokaria, and this seems to confirm Uncle Tintin's previous guess. After seeing Sakura buried in the insect cave and being tortured by the insect swarm, any person with a normal outlook would feel indignant at the existence of the Matu family. Because Uncle Tintin just flipped through the pages casually. I read the manga draft, so I didn't read too carefully many of the plots that were added later, and I didn't even read all the added content. Even now, other plots are forcibly added, and even the character Madokaria is added. It looks like a slightly normal character, but so what? I can guarantee that readers will never forgive you for this, Cheng. Uncle Tintin, who was originally an assistant, should not have made such a hasty decision, however, because he had seen what the Matu family did to Sakura before. This person with the attribute of Lilicon control, the uncle felt angry and even angered the entire Matu family. Therefore, it can be said that Uncle Tintin has no favorable impression at all of the newly introduced character Kiriakaria in the manga manuscript. Even when he saw that the new character's surname was Matu, he thought about it when he saw it before in the past plot. Uncle Tintin, who already had the impression that people in the Matu family are all crazy people, subconsciously had the pessimistic expectation that Sakura's next treatment will not be even more miserable. Ding Ding Ji-san, have you forgotten it again? Seeing Uncle Ding Ding's expression of disgust and resentment, Takahashi Makoto thought about it for a moment and understood what was going on. Then he sighed helplessly, although it has never happened since. In some ways, I'm glad that the impression of human heart spell added to the manga has outstanding effects, but haven't I told you before that as a god who created the world, you shouldn't put yourself in the wrong place? Put your original emotions into the world you created. You have to know who you are. Hey, aren't I about to observe it again, not wanting to be poisoned by the arrogant remarks of a certain second-level cartoonist again? The assistant, Uncle Tintin, said this while sorting out the cartoon manuscript, of course, because I have already read the plot part about Sakura before, so this time Uncle Tintin only needs to take a careful look at the plot that will be completed by a middle-class cartoonist. The plot imposed halfway begins from the perspective of Madokaria. To be precise, it should start from the conversation between Madokaria and Sakura's biological mother and biological sister. Madokaria, who returned from overseas, was playing and chatting with another lowly Rin, and learned that Sakura was sent to the Matu family, and was sent to the place that he thought was a devil's cave and escaped long ago. After entering the place, he immediately looked shocked and began to question Sakura's biological mother, the Tosaka Aoi whom he had always loved but became someone else's wife. What on earth is going on, Aoi? You know it without asking, right? Especially you, Kariya, even though she was the object of Kariya's love, and even though she was Sakura's biological mother. When talking about Sakura at this moment, Tosaka Aoi was suppressing all emotions, ignoring Kariya's panic and worry. He said calmly, "Why does the Matu family need children with Magi stir blood to inherit the family business? You should know very well." Why do you agree? This is his decision. The request was made by the Matu family, the Tozaka family's long-term ally, and he decided to agree to it as the head of the Tozaka family. There is no room for me to interfere. Even for such a reason, the consequences of separation of flesh and blood between mother and daughter, sister and sister, of course, Tosaka Aoi as the mother and Tosaka Rin as the sister cannot accept such a result, but they were once members of the Matu family. Although Kariya has betrayed the Matu family, he understands the cruelty of this fate best. Because magicians are such existences in the first place, and they can only live in this cold-blooded way. Is this really good? From the moment I decided to marry into the Tosaka family, from the moment I decided to become the wife of a magician, I was mentally prepared. It is impossible for a family with the blood of magicians to pursue even the most powerful thing. Ordinary family happiness, to Kariya, who seemed to want to say something, the magician's wife, who was, no, now Kariya still loves, stopped him gently but firmly. This it's a problem between Tosaka and Matu, and it has nothing to do with you who have left the world of magicians. Looking at the conversation between Kariya and Tosaka Aoi in the middle of the comic, Uncle Tintin couldn't help but curl his lips. Although the subsequent plot has not been completed yet, Uncle Tintin has already guessed in advance that Matu Kariya will be seen in the comic next. A character who seems relatively normal is definitely going to be a tragedy. Moreover, a certain middle-level cartoonist also very kindly gave a high-energy friendly reminder ahead. Is this really good? I have been mentally prepared. It is impossible to pursue even the most ordinary family happiness. This was almost the same conversation as before, but it was the last conversation she had with Kariya 8 years ago when she accepted the young magician's proposal. Almost the same dialogue, but cleverly used in 2 different scenes, and this feeling. Uncle Ding Ding put down the comic manuscript and sighed inexplicably. It really makes people feel scared. I don't dare to continue reading. Don't you dare to continue reading. The Sarada boy who was helping Mashiro girl carry the manga manuscript happened to hear the emotion of an assistant uncle when passing by Uncle Tintin, and stopped curiously. After taking a look at the 2 abnormal humans over there who were concentrating on completing the drawings, he asked Uncle Tintin in a low voice, "Hey, Tintin-ji-san, is there something wrong with the manga drawings? There seems to be no problem at Mashiro's place recently. No matter what new plot I draw, I have been refinishing the previous sketches. That's because the comic manuscripts for the next 2 chapters are all here with me." Originally, Uncle Tintin wanted to say this, but recalling the depressing and dark plot in the comic, and looking at the curious Sarada boy in front of him, he could only sigh silently, and decisively changed his mind and said, "Then it's because my progress has been delayed, I'm sorry." Is that so? Being inexperienced in the world means being simple-minded, so the young boy didn't notice Uncle Ding Ding's twinkling eyes, and he didn't pursue it further. Instead, he asked about the curious thing that made him stop before. Then Ding Ding sang, "The reason why you said you didn't dare to continue reading is... well, I just feel a little depressed." Uncle Tintin turned to Makoto Takahashi, who was bending over the table and drawing the comic manuscript carefully. After realizing that the other party had not noticed the movement here, he lowered his voice and said, "The boy Sarada explained, Sarada-kun, have you read Cheng's comics before? I wonder if you have discovered some patterns, or a special style." Rule and style. The young boy hesitated for a moment, then asked with some confusion, "Ding Ding Ji-san, what do you mean?" Generally speaking, Cheng's comics are usually very happy in the early stage, and then become depressed in various ways in the later stage. which is what people often say, how happy you are in the early stage, you will be miserable in the later stage. After seeing Sarada Boy's expression of "yeah, I feel the same way," Uncle Tintin twitched the corners of his mouth, tapped the manga manuscript on the table to be completed, and said to Sarada Boy with great resentment, "However, this comic is not like that. The narrative plot to be completed now has just begun, and it has already made me feel sad and depressed. If I follow Aiken's past style, then once the plot of the comic enters the later stage after the high-energy sadistic and depressing plot, I simply can't imagine how brutal it will be." "Hey, I say you two, let's stop chatting here," Makoto Takahashi suddenly and forcefully intervened in the Uncle Tintin and Sarada Boy's private conversation time with a deep voice. "Let's talk about Sarada Boy. Oh, I suggest you go to the refrigerator and take a look. It seems that I heard some noises just now, and it seems that a Bonkachin thief triggered the defense trap I set near the refrigerator. By the way, what's the mentality of setting up a trap near the refrigerator?" And after the Sarada Boy complained, he immediately turned his head and looked at a certain place, where a girl who was painting quietly should have been sitting. "But now it's empty." "Sure enough, after I heard that there were Bonkachin in the refrigerator, I knew what you were saying was true, Jisang." As Sarada Boy spoke, he ran towards the kitchen where the refrigerator was placed. "Although I don't know what the so-called defense trap by a certain middle-class manga artist is, but judging from the fact that the Mashiro girl has not made any cry for help so far, it seems that it should be. It's quite cruel." Deliberately looking for excuses to let Sarada Boy and Mashiro girl leave one after another, Uncle Tintin squinted at Takahashi Makoto. "Actually, Cheng, you are planning to talk to me about the chapter of the comic Fate that I am currently completing the plot of? What a pity." "Ding ding Ji-san, it's a pity that I can only ask you one question this time." Takahashi Makoto showed a happy smile on his face. "It's convenient and easy to talk to smart people," pointed at Matakuriya in the comic draft, and asked Uncle Ding Ding softly, "People like Matakuriya can also be called heroes? I have a crush on you. I really feel sorry for Kuriya-kun." It turns out that it's because he has had similar experiences, although he didn't do it to the extent of risking his life like Kuriya-kun. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao SD Mao. Chapter 634. Can people like Matakuriya also be called heroes? Regarding Makoto Takahashi's question, Uncle Tintin did not give the answer immediately. Instead, he used the excuse, "I haven't finished reading the manga manuscript so I can't comment easily," forcing a middle-level cartoonist to stop asking and obstructed continue to observe the manga manuscript yourself. Although it is not specifically stated in the manga, even Uncle Tintin, who is observing the manga manuscript for the first time, can still detect Matakuriya's love for Tosaka Aoi in the manga. He likes it and is always ready to give it to Rin. Whether it's a gift for him or he's angry about what happened to Sakura, everything stems from Matakuriya's fondness and love for his childhood sweetheart Aoi. Even now, the former childhood sweetheart has taken the surname Tozaka, became someone else's wife, and became the mother of 2 children. It is precisely because Aoi believes that living in Tozaka's home can bring her happiness, and it is precisely because she chooses to believe in Aoi's smile 8 years ago that Matakuriya gives up the idea of pursuing Aoi, because she likes, so respects Aoi's choice. Because of love, I respect Aoi's decision. However, until today, after learning the news that Sakura was sent to the Matu family, and seeing the unconcealed sadness on the face of the now named Tozaka Aoi, Matakuriya realized that he was wrong. Only then did I realize that I had made an unforgivable fatal mistake. Matakuriya, who was born in a magic family, naturally knows what magic is and what a magician is, especially the magic of the Matu family, and it is precisely because of this that Matakuriya hates magicians. Only then would he spurn everything related to magic in his family, and then choose to reject the fate he was supposed to inherit and choose to escape. Unfortunately, it was only now that Matakuriya discovered that he knew how terrible magic was, and he chose to escape because of fear. it was that kind of self that gave up the most important woman to him. That magician among magicians. 8 years ago, he did not stop Aoi from marrying the magician among magicians, so after losing his childhood sweetheart, Matukuriya regretted it countless times. 8 years later, he still did not stop the Matu family from marrying the magician. The one belonging to the Tosaka family was a transaction between magicians, so Tosaka Aoi now fell into the sadness of losing her daughter, making the existence named Matukuriya once again filled with regret. Matukuriya's past events and her feelings of regret and remorse are only partially presented in a comic manuscript of less than 4 pages, but it is through these incomplete plots that Uncle Tintin completes the story of Matukuriya. After 8 years of living and feeling, my heart is also full of helplessness and sadness. There is still a chance for redemption, there is also a chance for compensation. Standing at the door of Matu's house, which he had not set foot in for 8 years, Matukuriya whispered as if he was cheering himself up, "As long as I face the fate that I never dared to face before and only wanted to escape, just for the only woman in the world who I don't want to make her cry." Negotiating human relations with a magician who has no regard for human life is simply a meaningless matter, therefore, Matukuriya did not ask his father, who has ruled the Matu family for many generations, that is, the Matu family. The head of the family, Matuzukan, came up with naive and childish ideas such as returning Sakura back. But if you can get the Holy Grail, you won't need Tosaka Sakura, right? What are your intentions? In response to Matukuriya's straightforward question, the old man with a cane asked back. "Let's make a deal, Matuzukan. I will win the Holy Grail for you in the upcoming Holy Grail War, but in exchange, you let Tosaka Sakura go." Therefore, in order to regain the cherished daughter of the woman he loves, in order to put a smile on that woman's face again, is this the reason why Matukuriya plans to participate in this Holy Grail War? Even though we knew that Matukuriya was a participant in the Holy Grail War representing the Matu family in the previously completed manga draft, to be honest, Uncle Tintin had never thought that Matukuriya would do it. This level of risk-taking. You must know that in the Holy Grail War, because the existence called heroic spirit is an existence that humans and magicians cannot compete with, so any master who has participated in the Holy Grail War with a little common sense knows that it is better to kill than to kill for the almost impossible feat of heroic spirit. Killing the magician who is the master of heroic spirit is relatively simple. To put it simply, all the participants in the Holy Grail War are more powerful than humans. As for the heroic spirits who are invincible to magicians, participants as masters may die at any time. But unfortunately... Huh? Don't be stupid, you, a laggard who hasn't done any training in more than 10 years, want to become the master of heroic spirit servant in this short year. There is no doubt that Matu Zangyan rejected Matukuriya's deal. Using an excuse that seemed reasonable and sounded reasonable, he persuaded Matukuriya like a inducement. "Do you have a secret technique that can do this?" "Old man, your best insect technique. In the past, this was the Matu family's magic that Kuriya wanted to deny in the past, but now, it became Matukuriya's trump card when he participated in the Holy Grail War. Insert the marking insect into my body. The more than 100 kilograms of my flesh come from the unclean Matu family's blood, so they should be more suitable than other people's daughters. Kuriya, do you want to die?" Originally, Uncle Tintin didn't know what the so-called sealing insect was. However, following the conversation between Kuriya and Zangyan in the comics, he gradually understood the ferocious and even insane abilities of the sealing insect. Cold sweat broke out on the uncle's forehead. It was only at this time that Uncle Tintin finally understood how cold-blooded the magicians mentioned in the comic fate were. And what's even more heartbreaking is that Matuzukan did not deliberately conceal Sakura's experience from Matukuriya, and even told the murderous Matukuriya vividly and with a smile on his face, an insect to Sakura physical the whole process of the experiment. "So, Kuriya, what are you going to do? The little girl has been invaded from head to toe by bugs and is almost broken. If you still plan to save her like this, maybe I can consider your proposal. Although she does not have the amazing painting skills of Mashiro girl, the evil smile shown when Matuzukan gave the choice to Matukuriya was indeed drawn by a middle-class cartoonist. At least Uncle Tintin is watching it. After seeing Matuzanjian's evil and ghostly smile, a chill immediately came from behind. However, does Matukuriya still have the right to choose? No. When a man named Matukuriya re-entered the Matu family, he was destined to have no right to choose. He could only continue on the path of death until the moment his life ended. Holy Grail War. As long as we can win the Holy Grail War, then we can take back Sakura, who was sent to the insect cave. It can put a smile on Aoi's face again. And more importantly, participating in the Holy Grail War can not only redeem Sakura's future life, but also take revenge on the person who caused Sakura to suffer so much and made Aoi lose her smile. After all, Tokiomi Tozaka, the current head of the Tosaka family, who was the original founder of the Gozan family, must have had the command seal engraved on his hand at this time and participated in this Holy Grail War. The plot of Korea-kun, he is destined to be a tragedy. After putting down the comic manuscript and being silent for a long time, Uncle Tintin finally couldn't help but start talking. Although the uncle beside a certain assistant did not initiate a conversation request, it was completely like he was talking to himself. But now both of the two people present knew that Uncle Tintin was complaining to a certain middle-class cartoonist in this way. Let's not talk about whether Korea-kun won the Holy Grail War in the end. According to the old immortal's character, what if he won? Korea-kun will definitely be tricked to death by that old immortal in the future. Old immortal, are you referring to the Matuzukan? Makoto Takahashi hesitated for a moment, looked at Uncle Tintin with sympathetic eyes, and sighed helplessly. Speaking of which, Tintin-ji-san, your taste in naming is not bad. It really needs to be improved. I remember Chang, you just said that the manga manuscript for the next chapter has been completed, right? Uncle Ding Ding ignored the ridicule of a middle-grade cartoonist and stared at the pile of untouched manga manuscripts with bright eyes. I'll take a look first and then talk. Well, I said Ding Ding Ji-sang. Why doesn't the manga manuscript of this chapter follow the previous chapter and tell the story of Korea-kun's subsequent plot? Uncle Tintin quickly flipped through more than 10 pages of the manga manuscript and stopped observing with disappointment. He turned around and stared at a certain middle-level cartoonist. Why did the content of the next chapter suddenly jump to a young man named Weber Velvet? There are 7 masters and 7 heroic spirits participating in the entire Holy Grail War. This is what I just wanted to tell you. Unfortunately, Tintin-ji-san, you seem to be too impatient. Makoto Takahashi deliberately put on a show. Blame it on me, look, and Ding Ding Ji-san, have you forgotten something? What? Oh, Chang, that question you asked before. Recalling the question asked by a middle school cartoonist before he observed the cartoons, Uncle Tintin first showed a look of surprise, and then fell into deep thought. In the middle, after a long time, the uncle next to the assistant let out a long sigh and sighed in a sighing tone. Although Korea-kun has focused all his hatred on Tosaka Tokiomi, this kind of deliberate targeting his behavior is not in line with the behavior of a hero. But should a hero be a great being with noble character and flawless character? No, heroes are actually just like most people. Even if they create all kinds of deeds that are praised by the world, the heroes themselves still have their own cherished and loved ones, and they also have life or death enemies that they want to kill quickly. So, however, not everyone has the courage to embark on the road to destruction. From this point of view, Matukuriya, this poor man who was played by fate, can undoubtedly be called a hero. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Mao. Chapter 635. I originally thought that the plot of Lowly Sakura was depressing and dark enough. However, After reading about Korea's experience and listening to a certain Chuyuni cartoonist's casual supplement of Korea's tragic fate in the Holy Grail War, the assistant uncle realized that he had greatly underestimated the extent of the Chuyuni cartoonist's dark depression. There is no extreme depression and darkness, only more brutal depression and more insane darkness. Just through the story of Kiri Korea, one of the 7 masters in the comic FT, Uncle Tintin can feel how distorted this comic is. So, I say, Chen, are you really a man if you draw like this? Will the readers be beaten to death if this type of comic is serialized in a weekly magazine? Actually, this is what Uncle Tintin wanted to say, but considering the Chuyuni character and powerful force of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, the assistant felt that it was more appropriate to use this euphemism. It is natural for Uncle Tintin to have such doubts. After all, the publication in which this comic is serialized is currently preparing to be serialized in the weekly magazine Shonen Jump, which focuses on passion, friendship, and victory. However, judging from the completed comic manuscript, it is not yet known whether there are any passionate fighting scenes in this comic, but judging from the content of this episode in hand, it has nothing to do with the so-called friendship. As for victory, the way those magicians in the comics use all means to win, in the weekly magazine that focuses on Shonen kingly way, even if it can barely match the spicy and evil style, it will definitely be highlighted as an extremely weird existence. By the way, Ding Ding Ji-san, are you underestimating the capacity of weekly Shonen Jump? You know, many years ago, the weekly even serialized a manga as evil as DN. Facing Uncle Ding Ding's concerns, Takahashi Makoto was quite calm. With the progress of the times, human beings are becoming more and more receptive. Although the negative effect is that people's hearts become darker and darker, and their humanity is increasingly lost, but readers could even accept the manga DN back then, so how could they not be able to bear a mere fate now? Ding Ding Ji-san, never underestimate the degree of human acceptance of darkness and depression, and don't underestimate the bottom line of human nature that is lost from the bad roots. By the way, when talking about comics, please don't bring up such profound topics as human nature so casually, and I'm just a little worried, listening to the serious nonsense of a certain middle school cartoonist. Uncle Ding Ding complained helplessly, but Yoshida-kun hasn't seen the content of this episode yet. If Yoshida-kun comes to collect the comic manuscript soon, he will find that the story of the whole comic is different from what he originally expected. The scene created at the beginning of the comic Fate, the magician hidden in the other world, the projection of the hero in human legend heroic spirit, the holy grail that can fulfill all wishes, the comic revolving around these elements looks like a magnificent and passionate comic, and it has nothing to do with the so-called depressing comics. However, after reading the content of this completed episode, Uncle Ding Ding realized that he was deceived by the beginning of the comic. Even as an assistant, he was deceived by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, so he could judge others by himself. Uncle Ding Ding could imagine what kind of wonderful expression Yoshida would show when he saw the content of this chapter when he came to collect the comic manuscript. The expression of my cat will be very interesting, and it will definitely make me feel happy. Takahashi Makoto said this in a matter-of-fact tone, which made Uncle Ding Ding's mouth twitch. And hasn't my cat confirmed that the comic Fate has passed the serialization meeting and decided to be serialized in the weekly issue next week? It has already started to prepare for serialization in the weekly. It is impossible that after serialization for a period of time, Ding Ding G, you don't mean that such a plot will be cut off after serialization? That's right. There are not a few cases in the history of weekly magazines where serialized comics were cut off because of the plot. Uncle Ding Ding glanced at the comic manuscript on the table and sighed with some regret. If the comic was cut off because of that reason, it's really a pity and not worth it. How much effort did a certain middle school cartoonist spend on this comic called Fate? As an assistant, Uncle Ding Ding knows it very well. In order to satisfy himself with the expression of a certain character, Makoto Takahashi even discarded a whole page of the comics that had already been completed and drew it again. As an assistant to a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, This was the first time that Uncle Tintin saw Makoto Takahashi being so demanding on a comic. Such a strict cartoonist, who tried so hard to pursue a perfect comics, let alone the problems with the plot. Based on these 2 points alone, Uncle Tintin could conclude that this comic called Fate was definitely the best comic he had ever seen in all the years he had been an assistant, nothing less. However, if this comic, which has taken a lot of time and energy, is eventually forced to be cut in half due to plot reasons after being serialized for a period of time, whenever he thinks of the possibility of such a tragedy, Uncle Tintin feels really depressed for Makoto Takahashi. Is it a pity? Makoto Takahashi murmured in a low voice, stopped the brush in his hand, looked at Uncle Tintin seriously and said, "Although I am happy with what you said, Tintin-ji-san, but, Tintin-gi-sang, have you ever heard of another saying that fell from the sky? Ahem, no, should it be a saying that contains profound philosophical truth? Wait. This kind of similar scene, could it be?" When Uncle Ding Ding heard Takahashi Makoto ask such a question in this familiar tone, he instantly thought of a certain possibility, but if you want to stop something, it's too late for visual inspection. That is, to be strong without desire. Makoto Takahashi seemed to have not heard Uncle Tintin's words at all. Instead, he crossed his hands and clasped his chin, putting on a serious expression of fellow Taoist. "Please listen to me discuss the way of heaven in human beings in a short life. If you think about it carefully, you will find that what humans do in the process from birth to death is basically meaningless. However, despite being aware of this fact, humans driven by various reasons, we still do those meaningless things without hesitation." Sure enough, I knew it would be like this. It starts again. Uncle Ding Ding covered his face helplessly. After muttering something in a low voice, he immediately pretended to listen carefully, because if he didn't show, if you say I am a good student who listens attentively to lectures, a certain Chuyuni mangaka will definitely extend this behavior, which he and Yoshida call fanatical preaching of Chuyuni ideas, to more than 2 hours. As for why Uncle Tintin and Yoshida know what to do, and why they know the consequences of not doing that, to use common sense that is easily ignored by humans is, you envy others for their knowledge, but you don't know how much others have spent on it. Work hard to learn, you are amazed at the sophistication, and high emotional intelligence of others, and you are unaware of the physical and mental trauma they have suffered in the past. The root of all human behavior is driven by various instincts. Once human beings pursue something, they will act and pay for it, and at the same time, they will have 2 emotions, satisfaction and dissatisfaction, but it's a pity. The thing is, almost all human beings have indeed gained a lot after taking actions and contributions, based on the principle of equivalent exchange, but human beings are still dissatisfied because of their own greed. Makoto Takahashi. After seeing Uncle Tintin's distorted expression, a smile named joy appeared on his face. "So, instead of worrying about the comic being cut in half, let's think about how to complete the comic manuscript." "So, Cheng, what do you mean?" Uncle Ding Ding scratched his head in frustration and asked with some uncertainty. "Don't worry about whether it can be serialized, and don't worry about being cut in half in the middle of the series. All you need to do is it enough to just paint?" "Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And Tintin-ji-san, you will have all kinds of worries. To put it simply." Observing that Uncle Tintin understood his thoughts well, Takahashi Makoto nodded with satisfaction. At the same time, he did not forget to say in a contemptuous tone, "Because you are too greedy." In a sense, Uncle Tintin also admitted that what Makoto Takahashi said made sense, but then, what was originally a relatively normal exchange between the cartoonist and his assistant turned into a philosophical discussion. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 636. Now that the comic Fate has begun to be serialized, it means that Yoshida, as the editor-in-chief of the weekly, has to follow his past practice and collect the comic manuscripts needed for the serialization on time every week. Although before, Yoshida had collected manga manuscripts from Makoto Takahashi that were enough to support a 3-episode series, so according to common sense, Yoshida should not have come to collect the manga manuscripts in person in a short period of time. However, today Yoshida still came to Takahashi Makoto's house because a certain editor discovered something and had a reason to come to the house for verification. Hey, Chen, can you tell me, what's going on with the anime Fate //0? That's right, the reason why Yoshida came to question Takahashi Makoto was because of the comic Fate //0 that had just started to be serialized in the weekly magazine. Fate, there is actually a trailer for the animated version. However, not only the editorial department of the weekly Shonen Jump, but even Yoshida, who is the editor-in-chief, does not know about the animation of the manga. Hey, have you noticed it already? Tisk, I didn't expect you to be quite thoughtful about my cat, my familiar cat. To Yoshida, who looked a little excited, Takahashi Makoto curled his lips in displeasure. Obviously the manga hasn't started serialization yet, my beloved cat, you are still complaining with all kinds of resentment, I am sad. Sure enough, it is because you, my beloved cat, have had too much contact with humans. Have you been infected by the tsundere attribute hidden by humans? Don't change the subject for me. Listening to Makoto Takahashi complaining about his arrogance and so on, Yoshida looked unhappy. The comics that haven't been verified by readers are just animated or something. Is it possible that Taiga Club is just like that? Don't worry. Haha. My beloved cat, I can't pretend that I didn't hear what you said. Although Yoshida did not finish the sentence due to various reasons, the skeptical tone of a certain editor, Makoto Takahashi, was hear it clearly. Worried about poor animation effects, humph, my familiar cat, who do you think is the author of this comic? The person who completed this masterpiece is the arrogant demon cartoonist Hohoin Kuma. By the way, who gave you the courage to question the fierce decision of the demon god Phoenix Academy? I should be the one who says this, right? Faced with the ferocious pressure of the Phoenix demon god, Yoshida, who has been tempered for a long time, can barely withstand it. If it were Yoshida in the past, he said maybe he would have knelt down under the pressure of Takahashi Makoto's ferocious gaze. Whether it's a comic or an animation, Chen, you are so convinced that the existence called fate will become a masterpiece. Where does this confidence come from? Of course it's because of the depth of love. Makoto Takahashi put on an expression like you don't even understand this and looked at his editor-in-chief, who was completely confused, with contempt. My beloved cat is yours. So I don't understand, it's because you don't love religiously enough. Yes, I don't love you enough, piety. After the corner of his mouth twitched several times, Yoshida still said that strange word with difficulty. But Aiken, by the way, why didn't you tell me about the animation of the comics before? Ah, my beloved cat, what should I tell you in advance? By the way, don't you think there is something wrong with your logical visual inspection? Makoto Takahashi shook his head helplessly. The four-eyed fox asked the great demon god of madness Phoenix in Kairuma prayed, eager to get a popular anime that was selling well, and after feeling the four-eyed fox's devout love for the anime among the sacrifices offered by the four-eyed fox, the kind-hearted and unparalleled demon god Phoenix in Kairuma, I mercifully provided the animation script called Fate //0, so, these things have nothing to do with the editorial side of the weekly. Why do I tell you, my familiar cat? It's, indeed, but... Yoshida suddenly felt that what Takahashi Makoto said seemed to be very reasonable, and even made it impossible for him to refute. After all, according to Takahashi Makoto's words, Daihi Society inviting a cartoonist to provide a script or something, there is really no obligation to inform the weekly. If you are worried about copyright issues in my familiar cat, I can only say that Mortal Bones is just a mediocre person after all, and the things he considers are always so stupid and superficial. Looking at Yoshida, who fell into silence, Takahashi Cheng seemed to feel the pleasure brought about by mocking the other party, with a satisfied smile on his face, and continued, "The successor of the former commander, the current leader of your editorial side of My Familiar Cat, is not like you. It's so unbearable to say." According to the feedback from Four-Eyed Fox, it took a lot of time to convince the other party. Did the editor-in-chief also know about this? As the editor-in-chief on the editorial side of the weekly, not only did he not get the news from the cartoonist in charge of him in the first time, but even the editor-in-chief didn't report this matter to him. Tell yourself, you can imagine how depressed Yoshida is now. But why? Wait. Cheng, are you lying to me again? Cheating, ugh. Hearing Yoshida's doubtful question, Takahashi Makoto shook his head disdainfully, took out his cell phone from his white coat and shook it at Yoshida. Then, my dependent cat, you need to talk to Yoshida. Will the new commander call you to confirm? Why didn't the new commander reveal any information to you? According to my guess, it may be that, like me, you are not religious enough about my beloved cat. Is this still the reason in the end? After being complained over and over again by his mangakas about not being religious enough in manga, Yoshida said that he felt a little pain in a place that he couldn't describe. Speaking of my beloved cat, since you are here. Looking at Yoshida, who was about to leave with a tangled and depressed look, Makoto Takahashi suddenly stopped him. Then you need to read the 4th chapter of the manga Fate, the comic manuscript of the story. The content of the new chapter has been completed. After stopping, Yoshida showed a surprised look on his face. While turning around and walking towards Takahashi Makoto, he did not forget to whisper in a low voice, "It's still the same as before. It's so fast." Speaking of which, if Cheng's character can be eliminated, no, maybe if the bad taste is slightly reduced, that would be great. Tintin-ji-san, I'm sorry. I think I should take back my previous evaluation of you. I originally thought that I was muttering and complaining in a low voice, and it was impossible for a middle-class cartoonist to hear it, but Yoshida was too. I underestimated Makoto Takahashi. Compared to my beloved cat, Tintin-ji-san, your level of greed is really too small. Should I say how grateful I am now? Uncle Tintin, who originally planned to be a quiet soy sauce, paused for a moment after hearing Makoto Takahashi involve himself in the conversation, and understood what a certain middle-class cartoonist his intention was. And Cheng, don't worry. I won't tell you. Humph, I hope so. After seeing Uncle Tintin's cooperation, Takahashi Makoto curled his lips without leaving any trace. Hey. Originally, I wanted to take this opportunity to let Mr. Pavlov show off his recent mastery. Speaking of skills. I don't know what the new skills you are talking about are, Cheng, but this feeling of surviving a disaster. Looking sympathetically at the editor-in-chief Yoshida, who was targeted by a middle-class cartoonist, Uncle Tintin asked him again using cartoonist's assistant mode, I successfully reduced my presence significantly. So, I'm sorry, Yoshida-kun. A dead Taoist friend is not a poor Taoist. This is the most effective way to avoid danger when getting along with a middle-class cartoonist. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Email. Chapter 637. Originally, as a qualified assistant, Uncle Tintin knew that he should not be distracted when completing the comic manuscript, unless there was a disaster such as an earthquake. However, today, after witnessing Yoshida being induced by a certain middle-class cartoonist, after starting to observe the comic manuscript of the comic Fate, Uncle Tintin found it difficult to focus on the completed comic manuscript on the table in front of him. Don't look at Yoshida, who is holding a comic manuscript at the moment and reading it with gusto. Uncle Tintin knows very well what kind of heartbreaking plot a certain second-grade cartoonist has drawn. Therefore, Uncle Tintin can be very sure that the reason why Yoshida is so unprepared and completely addicted to the comic manuscript is that he was naturally deceived by the content of the opening chapter of the comic, just like he was before. Sakura, who was born in a family of magicians, was sent to another family of magicians by her father. Even Tosaka's surname was changed to Matu. This can be regarded as an adoption into the Matu family. Yoshida. The opening chapter of the comic manuscript in my hand is basically about this. However, such a plot has a strong influence on whether it is an editor like Yoshida who has read countless, no, he should be an editor who has observed many comic manuscripts, or an assistant with senior experience like Uncle Tintin. Suggestive and inductive. Especially in the manga, Sakura, who was adopted into the Matu family, also has a biological sister. This subtle reminder makes it easy for the well-informed Yoshida and Uncle Tintin to subconsciously come up with some follow-up plots such as sisters fall in love and kill each other without even thinking about Sakura leaving Tosaka. Entering the Matu family means entering hell, anyway, until a certain middle school cartoonist reminded him to look at the cartoon manuscript. Uncle Tintin had never thought that there was a plot more heartbreaking than sisters falling in love and killing each other. Expand. Sure enough, it is kindness that limits my imagination, Uncle Tintin thought a little tiredly as he looked at a middle school cartoonist who was carefully observing Yoshida with squinted eyes. While Uncle Tintin kept thinking about various things to add drama to himself, Yoshida, who was observing the comic manuscript of the comic Fate, suddenly paused, then his face immediately turned gloomy, and he flipped the comic manuscript with his hand. It's getting faster and faster. Oh, it seems that my familiar cat has noticed it. Ever since Yoshida picked up the manga manuscript, a certain middle-class cartoonist who was silent next to him as an observer showed a look of pleasure on his face. Smiled, and whispered in a tone that only he could hear, "Essay, let me see how much darkness and depression my beloved cat, as the editor-in-chief, can endure." Speaking of Uncle Tintin, although you didn't say a word after noticing Yoshida-kun's abnormality, you kept crossing yourself on your chest. Are you praying for you or for Yoshida-kun? This plot. The original action of turning over the manga manuscript came to a halt. After much hesitation, Yoshida gave up the idea of continuing to observe. He slowly put down the manga manuscript and looked up at Makoto Takahashi with complicated eyes. After pondering for a moment, he let out an inexplicable sigh. I haven't finished reading the manga manuscript in my hand. As a qualified editor, this should not happen, but Yoshida really can't stand it anymore. The content of the first 3 chapters, whether it is the setting of heroic spirit or the related plot of Holy Grail War, gives me as a reader a sense of grandeur and magical epic, which makes me feel like this. Editors with many years of experience can't help but have expectations, looking forward to the next battle between heroic spirits, looking forward to the war that will make their blood boil. However, who could have imagined that the next plot would be so depressing and dark? Just imagine, I originally bought a movie ticket to watch the epic fantasy war blockbuster called The Lord of the Rings, but after the screening started, I realized that what I was watching was actually a bite of meat, Uncle Bart's edition. This is an extremely cruel film, so, one can imagine how entangled and responsible Yoshida is in his heart at this moment. I mean Chang. Yoshida really wanted to ask Takahashi Makoto, but he just got the wrong manga manuscript, or, in other words, he directly said to a certain middle-level cartoonist, "What the hell are you drawing, Ghost?" and other angry comments. Hey! I just stopped when I saw this. Ignoring the glare of a certain editor and the low-pressure expression on his face, Takahashi Makoto quickly came to Yoshida and left a spread on the table. After opening the comic manuscript, a look of disappointment immediately appeared on his face. "My dependent cat, your practice is still far from enough in every sense of the word." That's not the problem, isn't it, Chang? Although I really wanted to turn on the roaring mode directly and angrily criticize the heartbreaking plot created by Makoto Takahashi, but after considering the reasons of force value, and the reason why a certain middle-grade cartoonist wanted to obtain after Yoshida took a deep breath, he tried his best to suppress his anger, and asked in a very low voice, "What is going on with this plot?" Huh? My beloved cat, don't you understand, Makoto Takahashi put on an expression of I am innocent and turned back to his exclusive work desk. That's what you see. That way. No, Chen, you know what I want to ask. Sakura's tragic experience, and Korea's doomed hero's choice, he didn't answer perfunctorily as usual, nor did he change the subject as usual. Today, Takahashi Makoto was very friendly and directly expressed Yoshida's doubts. Ah, I knew that you would ask this, my cat. As expected, the guy with the stupid face always asked questions so simply and directly. You have expectations for my cat. I am really a little naive. Explain it to me clearly, Makoto. Looking at Takahashi Makoto, who was pretending to be I'm going to say it to make you doubt your life after the pose, Yoshida decisively spoke first. Why do you want to draw this kind of plot? Don't talk a lot of useless things, explain it to me within 100 words. My beloved cat, are you sure you can really understand it with your IQ? Takahashi Makoto slowly sat on the chair, stared at Yoshida and pondered for a moment, then shook his head helplessly. Okay, my beloved cat, since this is your request, then, the reason why the comic plot develops like this is that, in simple terms, we cartoonists are all gods. Look, Yoshida-kun, your IQ is like this, why do you humiliate yourself? Dong. Dong. Snap. Dong. After Takahashi Makoto finished speaking, he suddenly tapped the table with his fingers, making different tapping sounds, and then stared at Yoshida with expectant eyes. No, to be precise, he should be staring at the direction behind Yoshida. As if he noticed the abnormality in Takahashi Makoto's eyes, Yoshida, who was about to continue questioning Takahashi Makoto, suddenly felt the murderous intent from behind, and decisively chose to turn around, wanting to see the assassin who suddenly appeared, but it was too late. Demasha. Accompanied by a familiar roar, Yoshida was pounced on the ground by a despicable attacker before he could react. My cat, as expected, your experience in the other world is as scarce as I expected. Looking at Yoshida, who was pounced on, Takahashi Makoto spread his hands helplessly and teased in a joking tone. When encountering a sudden attack, the first thing to do is not to turn around and face the attacker, but to keep a distance. Fortunately, I live in the surface world. If it were the other world where killings are endless, my cat, your grave grass would definitely be taller than me. Sadaharu, seeing clearly that after finding the attacker on his body, Yoshida cried out in surprise. Just now, that roar just now was made by Sadaharu. You completed the attack command well, Sir Pavlov. Ignoring Yoshida, who was pinned to the ground by Sadaharu, Makoto Takahashi boasted with satisfaction, and it worked very well with the sound device provided by the professor. My cat, thank you for volunteering to participate in this experiment. Thank you, sister. After trying several times, the pitiful Yoshida found that he still couldn't get rid of Sadaharu's suppression, so he had to ask Makoto Takahashi for help. I say, Makoto, can you let Sadaharu leave first? Yeah, sure. Is Makoto Takahashi such an easy-to-talk person? No, of course not. Sir Pavlov, pay attention. Dong. Snap. Dong. Snap. As Makoto Takahashi tapped the table again, Sadaharu suddenly left Yoshida and retreated to the door. Oh, you have mastered the retreat command very well. Looking at Sadaharu's actions, Makoto Takahashi nodded again with satisfaction. Sure enough, when you were observing me practicing patapang recently, you, Pavlov, have memorized all kinds of commands. By the way, what is patapang? Do you know what it is? Ding Ding San, Yoshida asked Uncle Ding Ding, whose mouth was twitching beside him, while tidying up his clothes. Uncle Ding Ding was silent for a long time before he squeezed out an answer that Yoshida could not believe. It's a game that Makoto has been obsessed with recently. Game. After hearing this answer, Yoshida's mouth began to twitch like Uncle Ding Ding. And when Yoshida really knew what kind of game Potapang was later, he recalled his experience at Makoto Takahashi's house before, and he had to sigh that Makoto Takahashi's family did not raise a dog. But what he meowed was a dog monster. Dear readers, Merry Christmas. I haven't found any work yet, so I'll resume writing after adjusting my mood. I apologize for the interruption in the past few days. That's all. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Email. Chapter 638. Ahem, announcement. When Uncle Tintin came to Takahashi Makoto's house early in the morning, he found that it was supposed to be a sunny morning, but the studio of a certain second-grade cartoonist was filled with dark tones, and a white girl stood silently aside. The young boy Yakuta was obviously in a muted state and could only look helplessly at Uncle Tintin, who had just entered the door. Your body listens to my command, and my life is with your sword. Follow the call of the Holy Grail. If you follow this intention and principle, you will respond immediately. I swear here that I will accomplish all the good deeds in the world, and I will punish everyone in the world. All evil deeds. As the seven heavens with the three great word spirits, come here from the will of suppression, O guardian of the scales. Looking at the magic circle surrounded by small light bulbs on the ground, and listening to the cadence of the summoning spell recited loudly by a certain middle school cartoonist, Uncle Tintin instantly knew what Takahashi Makoto was doing, to a certain extent. Say, Takahashi Makoto has gone crazy? Oh, is this the real-life version of Summoning of Heroes? Originally, I thought it was just a rumor. Uncle Tintin shook his head helplessly, walked to the side of the somewhat distorted Sarada boy, and murmured in a low voice. He said, I heard Yoshida-san and Aoi-chan say before that when they came to Aiken as assistants, they also witnessed a similar scene, where a certain cartoonist tried to summon heroic spirits or something. Ah! Tintin-ji-san, you're here. The boy Sarada looked a little uncomfortable. He looked at a certain middle-level cartoonist in a white coat. After the corner of his mouth twitched several times, he continued in a low voice, speaking of which, seeing such a scene early in the morning, as expected, normal people usually find it very strange, right? That's right. After all, after getting up early in the morning and seeing a magic circle flashing with colorful lights suddenly appear on the floor in an originally clean and tidy room, no matter who you are, you will find it extremely strange. Anyway, Sarada-kun, you'll get better once you get used to it, haha. After a short silence, Uncle Tintin looked far away. I'm a little worried now. Mashiro originally lacked common sense in life. Jong, you won't become worse just because you accepted Aiken's teachings during this period of time. Recalling the Mashiro girl with basically zero survival ability, Sarada boy acquiesced in Uncle Tintin's evaluation of Mashiro girl lacks common sense in life, and looked away at the person next to him who was happily eating bonkachin. Girl, look at a certain man in a white coat over there who was posing in various weird postures and still didn't give up summoning the heroic spirits. The boy Sarada sighed tiredly, I hope not. If Mashiro-chan becomes like Cheng. Halfway through his words, Uncle Tintin suddenly trembled inexplicably, then reached out and grabbed Sarada boy's shoulders tightly, and warned him seriously, Sarada-kun, we must not let Mashiro-chan become a being like Cheng. In this world, it is enough for a guy like Cheng to exist. Mashiro, shouldn't be, right, after thinking about the cute girl Mashiro, who suddenly had the attributes of Shuyuni and friends, Sarada boy felt that his own three views having withstood a critical hit from evil in this world, and, ahem, it's nothing. After imagining that the girl next to him was chewing bonkachin, just like a certain old man in a white coat over there, who often made some chubby remarks, Sarada boy suddenly felt that even such a white girl was super cute. Of course, Even the upright young boy Sarada would not tell Uncle Tintin, who just reminded him kindly of this idea. Talking about the relationship between Sarada boy and Mashiro girl, why does it feel a bit like the legendary fate between cultivators and thunder calamities? Cultivators want to live forever and cultivate immortality, so they practice against the will of heaven and improve their cultivation to cope with thunder tribulations. Young Kong Tai wants to do some indescribable and shameful things, so he starts cultivating and strives to improve the skill level of housekeeping almighty. In order to it is convenient for him to change jobs later and become a virtuous husband. After the cultivator withstood the annihilation of thunder and calamity, he entered the realm of immortals and embarked on the path to immortality. And after the young boy Kong Tai successfully cultivated the true white girl, in addition to using the master level housekeeping almighty skills to take good care of the real white girl, you can also do some things that cannot be described but will make people ha 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 every day. So Sarada boy, no, it should be said that everyone who falls in love with the purpose of getting married can actually be regarded as a cultivator? What I want to summon is a heroic spirit. Makoto Takahashi suddenly stopped the second act of summoning heroic spirits and quickly came to Uncle Tintin. After looking up and down, he said with a look of disgust. He complained, but what Wei Mao summoned was an uncle on the assistant side? The spell he summoned was obviously correct. It's me, not any other heroic spirit. I'm so sorry, Cheng. Although a certain middle school cartoonist finally noticed him, Uncle Tintin did not feel happy. Speaking of which, Cheng, why did you ask for? I came here early this morning. Could it be that I just wanted to watch you perform the summoning heroic spirit ritual? Of course not. By the way, Tintin Gi-san, are you being brave after realizing your shame? Makoto Takahashi tidied up his messy white coat, turned and walked towards his desk. Although the idea is too naive, you can be so motivated. My heart, yeah, it deserves a commendation. Award, ER. Uncle Ding Ding, who didn't understand what Takahashi Makoto meant at first, understood what the so-called reward was after seeing Takahashi Makoto pick up a thick stack of comics on the table. After carefully observing Takahashi Makoto's face, Uncle Ding Ding took the comics and asked in a serious tone, "Ah Cheng, you stayed up late again. There's nothing I can do about it?" Takahashi Makoto spread his hands helplessly. The dragon sealed in my body last night tried to break the seal again, until just now with the help of I finally managed to tame the spiritual power generated during the summoning heroic spirit ritual. Ding Ding Ji-san, maybe you who live in the surface world don't understand, but fighting against dragons all night long is a common occurrence for beings living in the inner world. Compared to this excuse, I would rather believe. Ignoring the middle school manga artist's middle school style rhetoric, Uncle Ding Ding had already seen through the truth like a fish jumping in a swamp. Ah Cheng, you must have been drawing again because you were drawing. I was so excited that I just kept drawing all night long. Tisk. Ding Ding Ji-san, your metaphor of elementary school students can't sleep on the eve of the spring outing is really infuriating. Takahashi Makoto complained about Uncle Ding Ding's revelation of the truth. You know, once the dragon breaks the seal, it will destroy the whole world. In other words, I am the one who saved the world. However, for me who saved the world and was able to become a savior, Ding Ding Ji-san, you actually used that attitude to describe me. Talk to me at a high speed. I say, Cheng. At this moment, Uncle Ding Ding really wanted to angrily say you stayed up late to draw comics, so you don't get any points back. The world is really filthy again. However, Takahashi Cheng did not wait for Uncle Ding Ding to refute, and reached out and hit the comic in the other's hand, saying, Ting Ding Ji-san, you should observe the plot of this episode carefully, and then, learn from Lord Weber Velvet, how to be a qualified minister. I feel that Weber in the original work is super cute. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 639. Chapter 639, The Deceived Assistant and Reinforcements Join In. Uncle Ding Ding's heart is tangled at the moment. Since a certain middle-class cartoonist made a request to carefully observe the content of this chapter, then the cartoon manuscript of this chapter will definitely bring surprises. After all, according to past experience, whenever a certain middle-class cartoonist, when it comes to comic drafts that need to be carefully observed, there are often some unexpected plots that give me, as an assistant, a sense of surprise that the plot can develop like this. However, what really troubles Uncle Tintin is precisely this. Although I was blinded by the content of the first 3 chapters at the beginning, after reading the life-worn encounter between Sakura and Matakuriya in the previous chapter, this comic called Fate is Uncle Tintin already has an idea of what the theme will be. This is definitely a dark and depressing comic. So, a certain secondary cartoonist specifically mentioned the plot and asked for careful observation. There is no doubt that what the following plot can bring to me will definitely not be a surprise, but a shock. To watch or not to watch, this is indeed a very difficult choice. Tintin Geeson, what are you struggling with? Seeing Uncle Tintin's confused expression and his unwillingness to turn over the comic manuscript in front of him, a middle school cartoonist in a white coat couldn't help but complain, "No, just reading a comic, why do you feel like you want to go to the battlefield to get lunch? Hey, don't stare at me with that stupid expression. Although I know you are worshipping me from the bottom of your heart, at this moment, what you need to observe is the manga manuscript and not the arrogant demon god Phoenix Academy's fierce majesty. Chen, have you noticed that after the evil taste of ghosts and animals, you seem to have acquired an attribute called Vicious Tongue recently, under the urging of a certain middle-level cartoonist Vicious Tongue?" After Uncle Tintin replied helplessly, he raised the comic manuscript in his hand and entered the observer mode. Hey, I'm going to read it now, I'm going to read it now. It was just that after Uncle Tintin turned over a few pages of comic manuscripts, his hand stopped again, and he did not continue to observe. Instead, he raised his head and looked at Takahashi Makoto with confusion. He wanted to speak several times, but he seemed to be hesitant again. "What? Ding Ding Ji-san, do you have anything you need to report to me?" Although a certain middle school cartoonist stayed up late to finish the cartoon manuscript, he did not show any signs of fatigue at this moment, but continued to draw the cartoon with full energy. Manuscript. After noticing Uncle Tintin's abnormal behavior, Takahashi Makoto put down his painting brush and turned on the Chong-2 style venomous tongue mode again. "Or do you want to ask for death? You can, but it will be seppuku or something. Please do it on the other side of the world. The blood of human sin flowing in your body will pollute the king's garden." "No, I've had this question since the last chapter." Uncle Tintin tapped the comic manuscript gently and stared at Makoto Takahashi seriously. "According to what you told us before, Chen, this comic called Fate should be about 7 magicians and 7 heroic spirits fighting around a holy grail that can grant any wish, right? But now, don't count this in my hand. It's already the 5th chapter of the manga, there is no fighting scene at all in the completed manga. Let alone a scene so majestic that it could be called a war. Oh, Tintin Ji-san, have you finally noticed? Is this statement that should be praised every bone has its day of counterattack very convincing?" Makoto Takahashi looked up at Uncle Tintin, and then his face showed he looked disgusted with "You didn't discover the truth until now, since you ask sincerely, I will tell you today with great mercy. In order to prevent Chen, please be more serious. The reason why there are no character battle scenes in the comic Fate." Listening to a certain second-grade cartoonist starting to change the subject, Uncle Ding Ding was a little angry and at the same time, somewhat helplessly, "Is it because the plot has not developed yet, or is it because, Chen, you haven't had time to come up with the comic draft of the battle scene yet?" "Of course, guess," after deliberately dragging out his voice, Makoto Takahashi replied in a wicked way. "Is it really not finished?" If it were normal, Uncle Tintin might be speechless because of this answer, and then be fooled by a middle-class cartoonist, but today, Takahashi Makoto's this kind of reaction made the uncle next to an assistant have bad suspicions. Hey, Chen, are you kidding? This comic is already being serialized. Now you are actually telling me that the battle scenes of the characters in the comic were not well conceived. If Yoshida-kun knew, you will go crazy, you will definitely go crazy. Tisk, as expected, I still can't hide it, as if he was infected by Uncle Tintin's worry. Takahashi Makoto's tone also became a little anxious, but there is no way to say that I have spent a lot of money recently due to the battle with the dragon. Time and energy, so I have never considered this issue at all, and even if I start to think about it now, it is already too late to do visual inspection. Tell Yoshida about this, and then. Originally, Uncle Ding Ding wanted to suggest that Makoto Takahashi tell Yoshida about this, and ask the editor-in-chief of the weekly magazine to help think of a solution, but after seeing Makoto Takahashi's unusual behavior, Uncle Ding Ding asked in confusion, by the way, Chen, what are you looking for in the drawer over there? At this time, of course I'm looking for a time machine, Makoto Takahashi said as he pulled the drawer out hard, and then, the whole drawer was pulled out by a middle school cartoonist. A mysterious silence, it seems to match the current awkward atmosphere. The time machine seems to be broken. Looking at Makoto Takahashi's helpless look, Uncle Ding Ding's mouth twitched fiercely. To be honest, at this moment, the uncle next to a certain assistant really wanted to curse MDZZ. Just when Uncle Ding Ding couldn't help but want to speak angrily to Takahashi Makoto, the young boy Sarada came in with Eiji Nazuma. Teacher Feng Guangai Yuan, Eiji Nazuma is here. Sorry I'm late. As soon as Eiji Nazuma finished speaking, he saw the comic manuscripts piled up in front of Uncle Ding Ding's desk. His eyes immediately flashed with anticipation. He quickly walked to the desk and picked up the comic manuscripts. Oh, these are all the subsequent comic manuscripts of the comic Fate? It's so exciting to be able to see it before the weekly serialization. Nazuma-kun. Why are you here? Uncle Ding Ding looked at Eiji Nazuma standing next to him and began to flip through the comic manuscripts. After a moment of confusion, he suddenly remembered, when this comic named Fate was serialized, a certain Chuyuni cartoonist once said that Eiji Nazuma was also one of the original authors of this comic. Too slow. My reinforcements, the Black Flame King, Takahashi Makoto did not stop Shinzuma Eiji from observing the comics. He just complained for a while, and then, under the astonished gaze of Uncle Tintin, he took out a thick stack of comics from the drawer that had just been opened. All the parts that need you to complete are here. Hey, I know, as if he was not satisfied with being interrupted in observing comics, Shinzuma Eiji pouted a little depressed, reluctantly put down the comics in his hand, and quickly came to a middle school cartoonist. While flipping through the comics that Takahashi Makoto had just taken out, he asked, Teacher Feng Guangai Yuan, are these the comics you mentioned before, about battle-related scenes? It seems that because he heard a very incredible news, Uncle Tintin was instantly stunned. Of course, it's just a part, Makoto Takahashi spread his hands helplessly, and said unwillingly, although I tried my best to draw a lot, but I have to admit that your skills in drawing battles are obviously better than mine, Black Flame King. But other than that, Eiji Naizuma put down the comic manuscript, poked his finger and whispered in a depressed tone, whether it is the conception of the plot or the creation of the character setting, compared with Mr. Howin, I still have some shortcomings. Then King of Black Flame. Makoto Takahashi handed the comic manuscript to Eiji Naizuma, and said seriously, for the birth of a masterpiece, I'll leave the battle plot to you. Masterpiece, Eiji Naizuma also took the comic manuscript with a serious look, leave it to me, Mr. Howin. Wait. You just said that you haven't completed the comic manuscript of the battle scene, where is the trust between people? At this moment, the only one who would express such depressed feelings is probably Uncle Ding Ding, who is on the assistant side. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 640. Chapter 640 Princess Weber Velvet is actually the real protagonist. Trust between people. The assistant uncle who discovered that his feelings had been deceived could only complain like this. After all, you are looking for a theory with Makoto Takahashi. Putting aside the difference in force between Uncle Tintin and Makoto Takahashi, if Uncle Tintin takes the initiative to stir up trouble, he will definitely be counterattacked, that's for sure. And more importantly, a certain middle-class cartoonist and his new wife AG are currently discussing how to construct the battle scenes in comics that have been ignored before, whether it is considering their own personal safety, or considering the righteousness of to complete the comic. Uncle Tintin knows that at this moment, all he can do is lament and complain about the fraudulent behavior of a certain second-grade cartoonist. No, in fact, Uncle Tintin can also choose to observe it. Not long ago, a middle school cartoonist stayed up late to finish it, and specifically mentioned the cartoon chapter that he was asked to observe. Picking up the manga manuscript and reading it for a while, after seeing that Sakura, Korea, and the Matu family-related plots did not appear in this chapter of the manga, Uncle Tintin felt both happy and regretful. In short, it was quite complicated. I am happy that I finally no longer have to see the tragic encounter between Sakura and Korea, but it is a pity, because in a short period of time, I will no longer be able to see the plot related to Sakura and Korea. Why do humans sympathize and feel uncomfortable because of the tragic experiences of others? Although there is a certain truth in the saying that human beings are inherently good, but more often than not, the reason why humans have emotions such as sympathy and sadness is actually due to subconscious empathy. When you see others unable to resist when facing tragic experiences, you will subconsciously think that you, as a human being, are the same way. This is the origin of sympathy, the unwillingness and powerlessness you feel from others. When you feel it, you will unknowingly bring in your own feelings as a human being. This is also the awakening of sadness. In other words, the so-called sympathy or sadness of human beings is superficially expressing feelings about the misfortune of others. However, in fact, it is sympathy for ourselves who may encounter such misfortunes in the future, and also feel that we may be similarly powerless in the future. I feel sad, that's all. If that's all it is, then perhaps the human beings in this world are just a group of sentimental species at best, but the sad reality is that the inferiority of human beings is far more than that. Whether it's joy or pleasure, whenever such topics are mentioned, human beings will always think of something that makes them happy physically and mentally, and then they can't help but feel joy in their hearts. But the creepy thing is that sometimes humans feel the pleasure is based on the misfortunes of others. For example, in the Fate series, Father Kotomine, who was induced by the King of Heroes to embark on the wrong path of finding happiness, awakened to the idea that one's own happiness comes from the distortion and struggle of others under the brainwashing persuasion of a certain oldest king. The bad taste. Some people may say that Father Kotomine's bad taste is too evil and too lost, but, humans, do we really have the qualifications to accuse Father Kotomine? That's not right. Get a sense of superiority from others, get a sense of accomplishment from other people's misfortunes. This skill originates from human origins. Humans can learn it without a teacher at all, and can easily improve to the level of the highest level. After getting good results in the exam, you will naturally feel happy when you see others doing worse than yourself. In addition to being happy because you have achieved excellent results, there are other reasons that are more easily overlooked. For example, for those who usually work hard, there will naturally be a sarcastic secret in their hearts. So what if you work hard? For another example, for those who don't work hard, there will naturally be if you don't work hard, you deserve the end. This is the joy that is like a victory declaration. The complexity and contradiction in Uncle Tintin's heart at this moment are exactly derived from the instinct of human origin, although Uncle Tintin himself has not noticed it, and will not notice it. But this contradiction and entanglement does exist, Just like in Full Metal Alchemist, Zolf J. Kimberly refuted Lisa Hawkeye's remarks on the battlefield. MS Sniper, you think killing is a sinful and unacceptable thing, but at the moment when you shoot the enemy, you will also have a sense of accomplishment such as hitting the target perfectly and so great a feeling of joy like a hit, right? So, sympathy for the tragic experience of Sakura and Kariya, is that really sympathy from the heart, rather than happiness because it's great that the victim is not me? Feeling sad for what happened to Sakura and Kariya, is it really sadness that comes from the heart, and is it not caused by the violent and bloodthirsty psychology of wanting to watch a knife-throwing performance and causing an accident? Uncle Tintin, who was observing the comic manuscript, suddenly felt a chill coming from behind. He put down the comic manuscript and turned around, only to see Makoto Takahashi still discussing the construction of some battle scenes with Eiji, the new wife. He couldn't help but scratch his head in confusion. It seemed like someone was criticizing me just now. Is it an illusion? In the manga manuscript of the previous chapter, since Sakura entered the Matu family, including the subsequent plot of Kariya, they basically revolved around dark and depressing themes, and tragedies were staged one after another. Although the plot of the previous chapter, the content only begins with Kariya starting to summon heroic spirits, but judging from the foreshadowing of the character dialogue, both Sakura and Kariya will eventually come to a tragic ending. But the content of the chapter in hand makes it difficult for Uncle Tintin to accept it for a while. It's not that there is any problem with the plot, but the overall theme style of the comic has changed too quickly. A young magician who was born as a magician in the clock tower was ridiculed by his mentor in a public execution for his creative thesis, and was also criticized for being useless. And when the young magician was venting his resentment, he accidentally obtained the holy relic used by his mentor to summon heroic spirits. Then the young magician, after stealing the mentor's items, consulted a large amount of information, and after learning part of the information about the Holy Grail War, he made up his mind to participate in this Holy Grail War, in order to, just prove his talents, make some achievements, and impress his mentors who once despised him and his classmates who laughed at him. In short, compared to the previous episode, which was full of despairing darkness and depressing content, the plot of this episode is much more cheerful. And he was rejected due to poor grades. He accidentally obtained the key to summoning heroic spirits. He had ideals but also had consciousness, and participated in events that were full of dangers but full of opportunities. No matter what Uncle Tintin thought, he felt that the experience of this young magician, very similar to the protagonists in many juvenile comics. Weber Velvet. Uncle Tintin read the name of the young magician in the comic manuscript, frowned involuntarily, and muttered to himself in a low voice full of confusion. From this chapter, judging from the plot, could it be that this young magician is actually the protagonist in this comic? It is said that Lord Weber Velvet was able to survive the Fourth Holy Grail War intact to the end. In addition to the attribute bonus set in Princess, in a sense, it seems it's really like turning on true protagonist immortality halo. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Email. Chapter 641. Chapter 641. The day the animation starts, I wish all readers a happy new year. Oh, the food is so rich. I'm so touched. The only person who danced with chopsticks at the dinner table without any awareness of being a guest was Eiji Naizuma, who devoted all his enthusiasm and interest to comics. Got it? Being able to freely draw the cartoons you want, as well as having delicious food that is full of color, flavor, as expected, Mr. Phoenix Academy's place is the ideal home for all cartoonists. Yes, it is indeed very rich. No, it should be said that it is too rich. Looking at the table full of dishes, Uncle Ding Ding swallowed hard and looked at the white coat again with a troubled expression. Makoto Takahashi said, "Speaking of Chen, is today a special day?" Remnants. Because I had such an intense discussion with the King of Black Flame today that I forgot about the passage of time in the human world, so I didn't have time to complete the Manchu Han banquet that was supposed to be made at the celebration, so, I can only cope with such shabby food. Makoto Takahashi spread his hands helplessly, but said sarcastically, of course for an ordinary person like you, Tintin-ji-san, you can be qualified. Enjoy this kind of food, humph. Engrave this gift today into the depths of your soul with your most pious and grateful heart, and remember it firmly. Hey, Your Majesty, Phoenix Courtyard, is so kind that I will never forget it for the rest of my life. For a person who likes food, watching other people taste various delicacies makes him tearful. Holding instant noodles while silently gnawing or something like that is definitely the most cruel torture, bar none. So, don't say that the uncle on the side of a certain assistant is shameless and has no moral integrity. If you can eat delicious food, you don't need a mere face and moral integrity. But Aiken, I'm very curious about what the celebration you just mentioned is. Don't you know, Tintin-ji-san, Eiji, the new wife who had already started eating, said unexpectedly while swallowing the food with difficulty, today is the day when the first episode of the anime Fate premieres. Didn't the teacher from Phoenix Academy tell you? Today is the premiere of the animation Fate. Uncle Tintin, who was having a meal, suddenly froze when he heard this. He looked at Makoto Takahashi in disbelief and asked in confusion, speaking of Cheng, are you sure the premiere date of the anime Fate is really today? Ding ding ji-san, even the Black Flame King who just arrived today has the news, and as my assistant, you don't know it. Makoto Takahashi looked at Uncle Ding Ding with some disappointment, and continued he said regretfully, humph. For the sake of Tintin-ji-san, who has worked hard as an assistant for many years, don't say I won't give you a chance, put down the food in your hands, and commit suicide by committing seppuku. Compared to committing seppuku, please allow me to choose to die. Uncle Tintin rolled his eyes and glared at Makoto Takahashi, then immediately turned his attention to the TV set opened by his new wife Eiji, chewing food while he said vaguely with an unbelievable tone, although I heard Cheng mention the news of the animation of the comic Fate before, but the first episode will be aired today, it feels quite unreal. King of Black Flame, do you still want to eat now? Ignoring Uncle Tintin's entanglements, Takahashi Makoto looked at his new wife Eiji who was eating so much, he couldn't help but frown and said, you should know that's why I specifically asked you to come today. Yeah, of course I know. Nyaizuma Eiji patted his chest to help him swallow the food, with a glimmer of light in his eyes, man. Even if I am temporarily a prisoner of delicious food, when the animation starts playing, I will be the same, I will observe it carefully. Humph. That's the best. As if he agreed with Eiji Nyaizuma's statement, Takahashi Makoto did not continue to pester him. Instead, he took the same behavior as Eiji Nyaizuma, watching TV while eating. By the way, a friendly reminder, please don't watch TV or play with your mobile phone while eating. You want to watch animation seriously? Oh, forget it. Looking at the two cartoonists who were completely focused on food and TV, Uncle Tintin realized that he seemed to be completely ignored, and decisively did not ask his doubts. And turned the depression of being ignored into the power of eating, lowered his head and started to angrily complain about the sumptuous dinner on the table. Just when the animation Fate started to play, Aiken Mumanjai, a good group of friends who were still carefully completing the manga draft in the studio, to be precise, it should be Landai's classmate who was in charge of drawing, but unexpectedly got a call. Moxie Fukuda-san, what's the matter with me? Landai, who was drawing a manga manuscript, was a little reluctant to stop the brush in his hand, but his vibrating phone still managed to break the time he was drawing the manga. That state is called Dingjing Shisui. I am now. Hey, Mashiro-kun, are you still drawing manga manuscripts now? Fukuda, the silver-haired guy on the other side of the phone, interrupted Landai's unfinished words in a hurried tone, turn on the TV now. Hurry up, Channel yes. Fukuda-san's phone number. Seeing his good friend hurriedly turning on the TV, the man with yellow-haired glasses who was writing a comic plot muttered in confusion, and his eyes were immediately attracted by the animation being played on the TV. Got it? Eh? This character looks a bit familiar. Eh? Yes, is it like this? Well, we are watching, okay, we will contact you later. After putting down the phone, Landai's expression looked a little strange, but his eyes were fixed on the TV. No, to be precise, I should be staring at the animation being played on the TV at this moment. Is the name of the animation Fate/Zero? It should be an original animation, but why do I always feel that the characters in it look a bit familiar? After staring at the TV for a while, the man with yellow hair and glasses turned his head. I asked my good friend in confusion, "Hey, Supreme, what's wrong with you? Why do you suddenly think of reading this? Didn't you say before that there are still many comic drafts that need to be completed today?" Chiren, watch it carefully before talking. After hesitating for a moment, Landai still didn't say the news he just heard. Even now, after seeing the animation being played on TV, classmate Landai still doesn't want to believe the news that the silver-haired boy Fusion just revealed on the phone. Magician, church, heroic spirits, Holy Grail war. As the first episode of the animation unfolded, the expression on the face of the yellow-haired glasses man gradually became serious. He pushed up his glasses slightly and looked towards the good boy. You said softly, "Hey, Supreme, I probably know the reason why you want me to watch this animation seriously now. The setting of this animation is simply a monster-level existence." Hey, Chiren, have you seen the latest issue of the weekly magazine? Landai did not follow the sentiments of a good gay friend as usual, but instead suddenly asked irrelevant questions. Is it the issue of Aiken's new serialization? Mr. Huang Mao and Glasses shook his head gently. No. I've been thinking recently about how the next plot of Soul of Chess should develop. You know the best. Neither have I. After hearing his good friend's answer, Landai suddenly sighed inexplicably. Chiren, we shouldn't ignore Cheng's new serialization because we are busy with our own comics. A Cheng's new serial, the animation just now. Hey, it's the highest. It can't be a lie, right? Combined with the unusual attitude of his good friend and the keyword-like prompts, Huang Mao Mr. Glasses immediately guessed a shocking truth. It's just as you guessed, Chiren. Landai pushed the spread magazine in front of his good friend and said in a tone full of unwillingness, "The animation we just saw is that new serial that Cheng just started recently. This should be the last update of this year, right? I have been busy helping to write the year-end summary for the past 2 days, and I have no time to update it. I am old and don't know how to use computers. Rather than making such a weird excuse, it is better to just say that I don't want to write. Well, I am providing an update after being busy. I wish all readers will go well from the beginning of the new year. Thank you readers for your support over the years. A certain cat is grateful again, Bose. In the new year, please give me your advice, above. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 642. As we all know, even if it is serialized in a weekly format, the update speed of comics is far slower than that of animation. Therefore, if many animation companies are eager to complete the animation when the comics are not completed, it will be easy to catch up with the comics. The progress of the serialization will lead to the later plots of the animation either starting to inject a lot of daily plot water, or the animation editor will be so imaginative that they completely deviate from the original work and recreate, or they can only temporarily stop and wait until the comic has been serialized for a period of time, and continue to produce subsequent plots. By the way, many animations are waiting for the original work to be serialized, and due to various reasons, sponsors and animation companies can easily turn animations that were originally well received by readers into extremely confusing for readers. I hope I will be able to see the next season of the series in my lifetime. It is precisely in view of this situation that many cartoonists will refuse all the olive branches offered by animation companies before the completion of the cartoon, even good friends like Ajumu, even if they want to fulfill their agreement. I don't want to leave the incomplete comics to an animation company to complete them. But now, a certain middle-level cartoonist has done this kind of behavior, which is abnormal for most cartoonists. Not only did they rush into animation without waiting for the completion of the manga, but what's even more crazy is that the animation was broadcast very close to the time when the manga was serialized. This is simply equivalent to the animation and manga being serialized simultaneously. Although the production of the animation is very sophisticated, even though the plot of the animation is also very good, but at this moment, the two good friends Ajumu are not at all focused as they should be when observing animation. The two of them are silent in an unusually synchronized manner. The atmosphere in the already extremely silent studio became even more dull and depressing. It's not because the animation called Fate/Zero is not interesting, but because these good friends still can't accept the shocking news that the comic was only serialized for 2 chapters before being animated. Hey, Supreme, let me say. After pushing up his glasses, the yellow-haired glasses man hesitated for a long time, and finally couldn't help but said, "You know." Eh? This voice is, Yadujiang, looking at a certain female passerby character that suddenly appeared on the TV. Landai immediately became extremely focused. That's it? It turns out that the surprise Yadujiang mentioned before is this, that, Chiren, let's talk about it later. Hey, I'll talk about it later. Looking at his good friend's extremely focused look, the man with yellow hair and glasses helplessly spread his hands and said. Although at this moment, a certain yellow hair really wanted to complain to his good friends such as, "I want to hear Yadujiang's voice, you have a lot of time at night," but he looked at it and was completely in a state of obsessed as his partner. A certain Huang Mao instantly realized that the good gay friend who had struggled with him had now become a member of an organization called Existences that are difficult for normal people to communicate with, just like a certain middle school cartoonist member. Practice has proven that even if a certain person has the status of good gay friend and best partner, and even has the advantages of getting along for a long time and leader of the cartoonist, he still can't compete with his voice actor's sister. Fighting for the position of the main palace, sure enough, the voice actress sister is the main palace of Landai classmate Akao Yat. However, it doesn't matter if his good gay friend ignores me. I just take this opportunity to observe the animation carefully. A certain cartoonist who was ignored by his good gay friend immediately calmed down and began to use the dual identities of cartoonist and reader to concentrate on, use the second ground to observe the animation being played on TV. Divided narrative, looking at the plot of the animation, from Emi Yakiritsugu's side at the beginning, he suddenly jumped to Tozaka Tokiomi's side, then to the Matu family, and then to the clock tower. Here, a certain yellow-haired man's eyes were full of brilliance, and he couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "Such a narrative method is really bold. That guy Aiken, isn't he worried that the plot will become confusing because of this?" However, after observing for less than 10 minutes, the man with yellow-haired glasses fell silent. Does the plot get confusing? No, absolutely not. Although he was a little reluctant, Mr. Huang Mao and Glasses had to admit that every character who appeared in the animation, even if he only appeared for less than a few minutes and had only a few lines, his image was already easy to understand. The ground leaves an impression on the observer. Tokiomi Tozaka, as the head of a family of magicians, can already be regarded as a noble in the other world, so when he appeared on the stage, his words and deeds exuded elegance and nobility. Emi Yakiritsugu, as a magician killer, of course he has a calmness like a killer. In the short introduction of the animation, there are also some unscrupulous behaviors he takes to achieve his goals. Director Ken of the Clock Tower is known as a genius magician. Although there are no clips showing his strength in the animation, the confidence and arrogant attitude when speaking are very consistent with the human setting of genius is so proud, As for Matuzanjian's shriveled old man, the dark background in the animation when he appeared, and the weird and unhuman appearance can easily give people who watch the animation the impression that this guy is definitely not a good person. Although the multi-line narrative method seems a bit complicated, because it revolves around the Holy Grail War, the main line does not become confusing. On the contrary, it is precisely because the animation spends a lot of pen and ink to whitewash it. Every participant in the Holy Grail War gives observers the impression that this is a serious and cruel war, rather than the previous established concept that the protagonist will definitely win in the end. Are human beings curious about unknown things? Gently pushing up his glasses, the yellow-haired glasses man sighed in his heart. Perhaps the reason why Aiken dares to serialize animation and comics simultaneously is precisely based on this. This is probably the legendary victory of character. However, the animation does not end here, because the more important character, the existence named heroic spirit, has not yet appeared. Heroic spirits, as important participants and important combat forces in this Holy Grail War, are naturally highly anticipated characters. Although the animation has been broadcast for a long time, and although the animation has popularized knowledge about heroic spirits many times, after whetting the audience's appetite, there is still no heroic spirit to appear. Since the Holy Grail War is about to begin, it is natural that the master and the heroic spirit are indispensable. Several masters have appeared before, but, where are the heroic spirits? Even the man with yellow-haired glasses who is distracted is also curious about what will happen next. Regarding the heroic spirit characters that are about to appear, according to the settings in the animation, I am very curious about which legendary existences Chen will choose to participate in this Holy Grail War as a heroic spirit. Just after the yellow-haired glasses man finished sighing, several magicians who appeared in the animation also began to summon heroic spirits. The footage of the animation keeps switching between several masters, and the spells used to summon heroic spirits are connected because of this. If it hadn't been mentioned in the animation before, the magicians of several masters being in different regions, the scene of summoning heroic spirits at this moment is more like everyone chanting a certain spell in a relay. The heroic spirits finally appeared, and the magician masters who summoned the heroic spirits behaved differently towards the heroic spirits they summoned. Some masters seemed to be extremely shocked by the heroic spirits they summoned. Some masters were excited and ecstatic because they had a chance to win. Some masters were even frightened and sat down directly on the ground. Looking at the performance of the magicians, Huang Mr. Mao Glasses didn't dare to be distracted at this moment. His eyes were fixed on the TV, for fear of missing the appearance of any heroic spirit. To be continued, however, such words suddenly appeared on the TV screen, as well as an unknown countdown. F***ck, the yellow-haired man with glasses lost his voice and uttered a classic Chinese curse. The corners of his mouth kept twitching, and he pointed at the TV and shouted loudly, "The plot is stuck at such a critical moment, this is definitely that guy Aiken. Such a style. Only that guy Ah Cheng can come up with such a wicked idea." If the appearance of the stuck heroic spirit has already caused many readers to curse, then after the animation ends, the next so-called friendly reminder can definitely be regarded as a magic last hit. Friendly reminder: the next episode of the anime Fate/Zero will continue to be broadcast at the same time next month. Please look forward to the appearance of all heroic spirits. Thank you for watching. Koro-sensei once said that you should prepare a second sword in life. So the friendly reminder after the animation ends, in a sense, can be regarded as the second knife tricked by a certain middle-class cartoonist, right? Work matters are still being delayed in various ways. I have been waiting for notification. This is simply as frustrating as telling you to be beheaded but not telling you the specific day to be beheaded. What about the promised new year and a new start? Ah, what a misfortune.